Hey everyone, welcome back to Autonomy Farms, and today we're going to be getting into a new video. And before we get into the video, please go on and click the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Let's go on and get into the video. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another beekeeping chat on the Monday night live stream. Thank you all so much for joining in tonight. Tonight, my special guest is Laryssa from Beekeeping Made Simple. I'm sure many of you have seen her channel before. She's all around on YouTube. Good stuff over there. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really do appreciate it. Just to kind of get us started, I usually start the same way for all my live streams, as everybody kind of who watches know. If you could just kind of briefly share with us kind of a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into beekeeping, if you would.
Sure. I became a beekeeper in my 20s when I was living in Philly. A friend of mine just suggested it. I knew nothing about bees. I grew up in the city. I was very much a city girl. And so we gave it a shot and it went horribly the first couple of years. But I just really loved it. It just kind of, I don't know. I became obsessed with it and learning about bees. And after my second year, I was a freelance graphic designer. And I decided to take an internship doing like a work trade on a farm on the big island of Hawaii. They were a bee farm, coffee, magnut farm, and they just always had this beekeeping internship. So I moved there and learned beekeeping on the big island from them. When I was working there, I got another job working for another bee farm on the island. And it turns out that Kona on the big island is like the home of some of the biggest queen breeding operations in the world. Kona Queens was across the street. Big Island Queens was, I actually rented an apartment in their old grafting shack. I lived in their grafting shack for a while. And I stayed there for 11 years. And I ended up doing beekeeping tours, working as a beekeeper, starting my own bee farm, and just moved back to Pennsylvania 13 months ago.
I saw that on your YouTube channel. I remember you talking about that recently. We're going to get into that in just a little bit because I've talked to many beekeepers about moving. I'm sure it can be a challenge to kind of figure out things. So, you have a YouTube channel. I'm sure many people who, watch you. So kind of how did that come about? What made you decide to start, publishing on YouTube?
Yeah, I really put off the YouTube because I started a podcast because I was teaching a lot of people about bees and beekeeping. The agrotourism is kind of becoming popular in Hawaii. A lot of the coffee farms do tourism and stuff. And I got so tired of teaching people about, like the basics of the bees. This is the queen, she's the mother of the hive. And so I started a podcast just for fun to dig a little bit deeper into learning about bees and then just sharing it with people. The people in the Beekeeping Association really just kind of roped me into doing classes because nobody was offering classes. Because when you're on an island, you're limited. You can't go out of state. You can't go out of the county. It's like you're not going to fly somewhere else. So I started giving classes, beekeeping classes, and then when I got pregnant, I couldn't do in-person classes, so I put them online. And at the time, no one was really doing online classes. So I put them online just for the people that couldn't find in-person classes. And YouTube it's just where you have to go when you want to market yourself. Like there's only so much you can really teach people on a podcast when you can't show them. I couldn't teach people beekeeping. I could just teach them more entomology and about honeybees, but you can't show them how to take care of bees without the visual.
Mhm.
But I really I just hate the sound of my voice. I hate looking at myself on editing the videos, and I felt so stupid talking to a camera my bees were never on my property. They were always on other people's properties. And I felt so stupid just talking to a camera in some guy's yard. It's not even my own yard. It's his front yard. And but it got easier and easier as years went by, and I just deal with it. And YouTube's just a great platform for people to teach.
Mm-hmm. That's where everybody goes. If they're the one to learn from.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's just really the best way to teach, especially for beekeeping. Books, I have no interest in writing a book because it's I don't know, you can't teach people how to keep bees in a book. You could tell them stories, but you can't really teach beekeeping and some of these other formats the way you can in a video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when I started going on YouTube and recording, I hated editing. That's probably one of the worst thing. Not the thing of just editing. It was boring, but I didn't like to hear my voice or look at myself. It's kind of weird. But I eventually got around to it. I mean, it's kind of, got around to it. I used to do a lot more teaching stuff on here, but now I do more vlogging things. So, I mean, it's just, not as hard to do so. I think the next thing I do want to kind of bring up is, as you kind of mentioned a couple of times that you used to live in Hawaii and now you're moving. Now you recently, you moved to Pennsylvania. So how was that transition? Is it hard? Was it hard for you? Your bees having to transition into a different climate.
Yeah, I mean it's expensive. I sold my hives I guess 2 years ago. Because you can't put your house up for sale when you have stacks and stacks of bee boxes on the side. The realtor's you gotta clean this up. So I had to sell my bees a year before we even moved, and then start selling the beekeeping equipment and buying it all back, coming here, figuring out where to buy bees, and trying a little bit of everything, figuring out when to do stuff and piecing it all together. But it's also just been really exciting in a scary kind of way, but it's also, it pulls you out of that. You kind of start to do the same thing year after year as a beekeeper when you're in the same place. And then especially as someone that's trying to teach people how to get started beekeeping, I'm now in their same position. So it's just given me so many more ways to teach people and to help them now that I'm in this spot and I'm figuring it out myself all over again. And I have so many more ideas for ways to redo the class and add different tools to help people. And I also, a big reason why I didn't want to go on YouTube was also because I was in a warm climate, and I felt like a lot of beekeepers were just well, beekeeping's easy when there's no winter and there's no snow. What's your problem? Bees live forever. And I I eventually realized that there was something I still can teach people, even as someone in a warm climate. There's a whole nother level in the cold climate. But I don't know. How cold does it get for you in the wintertime?
Well, I'm down here in Alabama, as you can see, I'm right here. But it don't really usually don't get too cold down here. We usually have mild winters, but last year, we had some snow down here, which is really rare.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we got like 6 inches, 7 inches. It kind of varies from spot, but it can get cold. But usually, it will kind of maybe get down into the 30s, maybe the 20s, rare cases. But usually, it'll get down into the 30s, and our highs will be in the 50s and 60s. So it usually ain't like bad. A lot of times we'll have spells where it's kind of cold for a couple of days, but then it gets kind of warm back up. I think the big problem for us down here is we have up and down temperatures because we'll have days in December where we'll be in the 60s and the 70s, and bees will fly at that temperature. So we have to be careful with our bees starving out, flying and then going back cold. So we do have to battle that, but it's usually mild. And most people say that a lot of northern people say that's pretty easy to manage bees down here. We have our own challenges though. We have to deal with fluctuating temperatures. It don't stay cold all the time where the bees are for the most part clustered up the whole time. That's probably not the case down here. They're flying a lot of times during winter. It's just we just have to watch it, make sure they don't starve.
Yeah, and when you don't have a frost,
Mhm.
uh, your varroa mite levels and the small hive beetle population is like out of control. And if the varroa mite is one of the big causes of a hive to collapse, if you're in an area where the varroa mite population is like triple what it would be in other areas, then that does make beekeeping a little bit more difficult. So yeah, I eventually got over that, like trying to prove myself or feeling like who was I to talk about beekeeping? But now that I'm in a cold climate, it's like a little bit easier for me to be like, well, hey, I've been there and I'm here now, and I can like tell you that there's hard parts about both of it and help people out a little bit better in both of those climates. Because sometimes the people in the warm climates, I feel like they get left out because people aren't always addressing what to
Mhm.
do in wintertime when you don't have a frost. And yeah, your bees eat through their resources like so crazy when they're out flying around. When they're clustered up, they're like the president of my bee club was saying that, I mean, they're only going through like maybe 3-4 pounds of honey a month if the hive is, a good size for the cluster and it's not losing too much heat. Like they're not going through much honey the way they are where you guys are.
Oh yeah, that's our main problem down here. That when they're flying, they're burning a lot of honey. That's why sometimes, not all the times, now we have some advantages down here, but I do see where an advantage for northern beekeepers if they prepare their bees right, the right way to get through winter. There's more times where it's more cold where they're not going to be breaking cluster as much.
Mhm.
That's kind of where I want to get to. How are the temperature? I know it's probably the temperatures are way. I'm sure there's much different from Hawaii and Pennsylvania. I'm sure that. What were the temperature ranges in Hawaii for y'all when you were there, and kind of how is that compared to Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Hawaii's, it doesn't even range much at all.
Mhm.
It's like never that hot and it's never that cold.
But
I had most of my bees in the higher elevations because the Big Island has almost all of the climate zones in the world are on the Big Island of Hawaii. It's like 10 of the world's 13 climate zones are there. So you get snow on Mauna Kea, you have a semi-arid desert. It's like you just wake up and you're like, do you want to go for a hike in a rainforest where it's cloudy and cool, or do you want to go to a hot, sunny, dry beach? Like you just pick what you want to do and then you go to that town, to that climate. But for beekeeping, you want like the moist, rainy area. So the higher elevations is where I put my bees. And so, it was really just like 75 to 85 pretty much year round. It would go down to the 50s at nighttime in the winter. But the winter time doesn't really start until like December. Um, and it would pretty much stay cool until almost like June. But it really just like it's the temperatures like hardly fluctuate at all.
Yeah.
There is like a lack of, and there's not much of a nectar flow after the Brazilian pepper tree blooms in like that August, September. So October to January, it's pretty quiet. There's not much going on. And that's when it's just tricky. You don't want small hive beetle infestations, but you don't want to take too much food from them. The populations go down quite a bit, and then they bounce right back in February. They're just like bursting from the avocado and the mac nut start. And here in Pennsylvania, it's like 78 today, but it's, going down in the 50s at night. There was condensation in my hive yesterday when I opened it up. And it's like, going from like low 70s to mid 80s for the most part. But yeah, we got quite a bit of snow last year. So it's the fluctuations. I think I see more weather fluctuating in Pennsylvania in 1 week than you would see in an entire year in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of how it is, around here. I'm sure, like, nothing. I guess for me, down here, we have a lot more fluctuating temperatures, as I mentioned. But we do have to worry about them running out of food. But I do find that interesting, kind of the difference between fluctuating temperatures in Pennsylvania and not having much in Hawaii. I'm sure it felt nice, So
It
now
gets boring, honestly. It gets a little boring. You're just like, I just want to wear a sweater or drink hot chocolate. I want to be cold just for like a couple hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
On Christmas, it's really popular for people to drive to the top of Mauna Kea and to fill up the truck bed with snow and then bring it down and like have a snowball fight or make snowmen on the beach. Just for the sake of feeling like you have a little bit of a cold Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Beekeeping ain't easy no matter where you are. Right? That's correct. Yeah, you're right. Let's see, I'm gonna go through see if I have any more topics. I do want to mention. That's right. I did want to ask you, how many colonies do you have at this moment?
4. I started with 3, and now I have 4. And yeah, it makes me nervous. It's not a lot. I don't really like to have less than 5.
Yeah.
And I think it's like really hard to keep bees when you only have a few colonies. But didn't really want to buy so many right off the bat moving here. So see how it goes.
Yep. I get you. I started out the year before too. I usually stay kind of small. I usually don't get big, but this year I kind of tripled, got up to 13, and all of them are looking good. I just need to kind of get them ready for winter, get through winter, and come out next year. We'll see how everything goes. But I'm just right now down here. I'm gonna try to get into flows in a second, because usually I like to get into what people are doing now. Our goldenrod is blooming right now. We usually have goldenrod in fall, and then in spring we'll have tallow, privet. Those are our main flows. What about you? What are some flows that you have in Pennsylvania? For nectar.
There's the goldenrod is still blooming. It's been blooming for a while though. We went up to Maine the 1st of August and it hadn't started yet. We saw it in Maine, and then like by a week or so after, goldenrod had started down here. Yeah, I mean, that's the big question I'm really asking myself, because my bees, I've been feeding them already and they are just taking the syrup so fast, and they are like, they keep flying into my house because they're like smelling, I guess, the syrup or like whatever tools I was using in the garage. And then like, they're just like, they seem like they're on this desperate search and they're like everywhere. I definitely see a lot of goldenrod, and there was a huge field of sunflowers, but it's like 2 miles from my house. So I'm not sure if they ever made it out there. And right now, I'm really trying to figure out what I should be planting for next year and where I should be throwing the seeds. We're less than a mile from a state park and a pretty big lake, but it's really not. There's also 100-acre farm behind us that's just has some horses, so that's covered in clover, and the clover's still blooming, but a lot of it is that white clover, which I don't even think the honeybees really go to, the white clover. So it's right now I'm just trying to figure out what I should be doing better for next year. At the very least, the early spring, I we have a willow tree in our backyard, and I believe the maple is a good food source. Um, so I think the springtime might be okay, but I really need to plan for the late summer and the fall. I have a ton of pumpkins growing, but it's not really not like enough. You know, like you kind of need trees. I'm hoping to plant maybe some apple trees. I'm more of like a tree grower than a veggie garden. They're a little too time consuming for me.
Mm-hmm. My next question for you is I have questions that I usually ask many beekeepers. What is your favorite and least favorite thing about keeping bees?
um, my favorite part about beekeeping is really like at this point as a beekeeper, my favorite part is just like seeing them around the my garden and my house, and like just having them nearby. uh I used to always have them on other people's property, and I was always moving them around just to find a good place to get a lot of honey to sell. But now, since I'm not looking to sell honey and it's more just for education and enjoyment, I really love having them just around. I don't like opening the hive so much. I feel like maybe now that I have kids, I feel like I'm just like really pissing them off and disrupting them. It's like, someone opening the door when I'm trying to put a baby to sleep. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
stop it. This is like a temperature controlled dark room that I'm trying to keep perfect for this like little baby, and you're annoying me. And that's
Yeah.
how I feel when I'm opening the beehive. So I don't really, I hate the whole treating. I hate testing for varroa mites. Like that, of course, is like, I hate that part. Um, I hate feel like I'm going to war against these like little parasites. But the part I love the most is just now having them at my home, and we have like an old sled that we filled up with water and put some plants in, and the bees are always going to the water, and it's close to our house. And I have a daughter who's 3 and a son who's 6, and so they now are like finally seeing bees and like understanding what I do. Whereas before I would just like get into the car and go somewhere and be gone for like the day. But now that the bees are at my home, I really like just being able to share that with them, and them seeing them in their environment where they're busy and they're not concerned about us and we're not annoying them, and they can just like watch them and observe them. That's like by far the best part of having bees.
Mm-hmm. I would say that I'm not really a big fan of testing or treating either. I usually don't test. I usually just treat. I don't really do any testing. I do sometimes. I just don't do it as much. I used to a lot whenever I started, but it's just kind of faded for me. I don't know, but everybody else can do what they want to do. But um, extraction can also be something that I'm not too a big fan of, and I plan to do an extraction here in the next couple of weeks down here, and maybe probably sometime in mid October. I think I've talked to many beekeepers; they're planning to do the same thing. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
extracting, once you've done it a few times, then it's like it's not fun. It's fun the first couple of times you do it, the harvest.
Mhm.
Now it's like a big sticky mess.
Yeah, kind of gets can't yeah, for me when I first did it, it's pretty fun and pretty interesting and really cool, but once you keep doing it, it just gets a little more difficult. Not more. I wouldn't say more difficult because it's the same every time, but just a little bit more not as fun.
Yeah, it's like the longest day of the year.
Mhm. Do y'all have you have beetles in your area? Small house beetles? Because down here, we have a big problem. I kind of saw Check and Ace comment because a lot of folks don't have beetles in their area.
We do. Yeah, I've been seeing them in the hives. I put only to the extent that I've put in brawny Dynamax towels to trap some, but not a lot, just like a couple under the lid. Definitely not the extent I saw in Hawaii. It was absurd. But and it took a while. I don't think I saw a hive beetle until it was like August. But something I'm a little concerned about is like in Hawaii, I never used pollen patties because that was just like where the small hive beetles would slime up first and the bees would never stop it. And so here, like people are all about putting the pollen in and then you can put pollen in the wintertime. And I just like really still have a hard time with this concept of putting the pollen patties in the hive, and small hive beetles aren't going to just like cause a ton of trouble with it. But yeah, it's not too bad, but they are here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've a lot of folks around here, especially more north. We don't have problems down here. I'm sure you're probably we probably don't experience as many beetles as we do down here. Now down here, man, we a lot of times we have a whole bunch of problems with them. But luckily this year I haven't had that bad of issues with them. But in 2023, whenever we had a very bad year, I think it was some type of cold snap early on, just kind of killed everything, and it just kind of disrupted everything. And our flows were acting up, everything was going wrong, and man, the beetles were just having a field day with the bees. I mean, I could open up colonies, and there were a whole bunch of beetles in every single colony, and it forced a lot of my colonies. One of them absconded because it was a slimy mess. It was disgusting whenever I opened it. It always is when you get those slime outs. And uh,
Mm.
luckily, only one colony got slimed out. The others didn't. It was just a smaller colony. It looked really good, but I think ever since 2023, our flows have been better every year. 2024 and this year has just been better years for our flows, our spring flows, and I'm hoping this goldenrod flow is going to help us out a little bit. Like I said, earlier, I've been starting to feed, so that's kind of where I'm kind of getting to our next topic here is kind of like you mentioned earlier that you don't inspect as much, neither do I. I don't inspect all the time. I do sometimes, but I'm don't overdo it. I kind of try to be more intentional with my inspections, doing stuff for a reason. So, kind of, how do you manage your bees? Mite treatments, feeding, um, and all that stuff.
Um, well, this year the feeding's been, it was like almost non-existent in the springtime. Um, I fed them just for the first couple of weeks. It didn't really seem necessary, but because of that cold weather, like you mentioned earlier, that a lot of the southern states had, the areas that people bought packages from, and Georgia and Tennessee, their queen breeding was pushed back. So I didn't get my bees until like the end of April. So by then it was like, you just put some feed in there so they weren't like starving those first couple weeks in an empty beehive. But then other than that, it wasn't really necessary. And hopefully I won't have to feed much, if at all, in that springtime phase of next year. Right now I'm feeding like a 2-to-1 just because my hives are really good in population, but still low. Um, in the food. I really was thinking that the area that they're in would be much better for them in terms of food, but not, I mean, maybe it's just comparison to Hawaii. And I have higher standards, but I'm feeding, and I plan to probably do it for the next couple of weeks, at least probably until like maybe mid-October. For treating, I did not treat in the springtime because the package of bees I purchased, he said that they were treated with Apivar before they made the packages. So I left it at that. And the other two, the two nukes I bought locally, he said that he didn't treat in the spring. He just treats in the late summer and the fall. So I just went with that and just monitored. I don't use foundation in my hives for the most part, so I pull drone comb as they make it, and will open up cells to just keep an eye on what the infestation rate is. I mean, I don't do my tests like every month or every other month religiously, like I tell people to. Only because, you start to get a feel for it year to year. And when you don't have like one beehive or two beehives, you don't have to monitor it the way you do when you have more and the population's so low early on. But I am pretty strict now about treating in the late summer, like after the honey flow ends in the late July, and then plan on doing another treatment soon. That's one part that I'm still not totally sure on because I was going to use, I'm going to use oxalic acid, but now that there's like a time when there's no brood present, which is crazy because I haven't seen that in over a decade, there's a lot more options for us. Like oxalic acid wasn't really, even the formic acid, it's not so effective in those high humid climates. And it's really difficult to get because nobody wants to put it on a cargo ship to send it to an island, and it can't get put on a plane and flown over. So I was only treating once a year there, and that was sufficient. But now it's, I'm very strict about the late summer and fall treatment. Before I close up the hive, I'll probably do that late in October. The springtime's a little bit of like a wild card, in my opinion. Sometimes you might need it and sometimes you don't. I kind of just like plan to play it year to year and see how the bees do and how well they can handle the varroa and stuff.
Jack and Janae asked, are your kids interested in the bees?
They are, fortunately. I mean, it's a little bit good and a little bit bad. They keep asking me if I can get them a suit. And I'm like, I don't like getting you a suit. I just, it's too much having well, she just turned 4, my daughter. So having a kid that young in like a bee suit, the bees were like, 2 of my hives that I bought locally were very aggressive. And so I'm used to opening a beehive and with just a veil and a tank top and shorts and flip flops. And now it's like I'm afraid to even take my gloves off. They're very like just the slightest little thing that shakes and they're just like on me. So they do want bee suits. But they are very curious about them. And my daughter unfortunately stepped on a wasp nest. She stepped on a yellow jacket nest a month ago and was stung 6 times. So now her interest in anything that flies and has a stinger on it has like gone down quite a bit. But she still knows the difference between bees and yellow jackets, but she doesn't trust the bees as much as she used to. But I mean, I like give them, if I find a dead drone sitting on the lid of the beehive or the landing board, I like pick it up and I give it to them. And they play with dead insects quite a bit.
Yeah, usually yellow jackets are much more defensive than bees. I hate yellow jackets, and they usually don't bother my bees. They like, I see them all the time around my feeders whenever I'm feeding my bees. But I haven't had too much of an issue. I just keep watch on. I know some people have issues with yellow jackets, attacking bees. But that gets me to feeding. So what do you do? I know 1 to 1, 2 to 1. Everybody knows how to feed, but do you put any additives, anything to that, or do you just do 1 to 1 sugar water whenever you're getting ready to feed?
Now this time of year, I'm just doing a 2 to 1, and I'm not adding anything into it because it's cooler out, and they're just eating it so fast. It's I add Honeybee Healthy and an amino boost to it in the springtime. I considered adding the amino boost in the fall, but I used to think that the Honeybee Healthy was like good for the bees and helped them digest the syrup better. But the more I've read about it, it's just really to keep it from spoiling. So I'm not putting it in this time of year.
Mhm.
And it's just like right now I'm just trying to like bulk up the hive and give them more food. So at the rate they are taking the syrup, if I was to add anything in there, I feel like I'd go bankrupt just with all the supplements. But in the springtime, I'm more particular about it than I have been in the fall.
Mhm. Interesting question here for you. Is Pennsylvania honey any different from honey in Hawaii?
Yeah, the honey. I mean, I know a lot more about the Hawaiian honey than I do the PA one. Um, I know very little about the Pennsylvania honey, to be honest. uh, like for the most part, like the honey just tastes kind of like a wildflower honey and like the clover honey, the honey I've tried from my beehives here. It's good and it tastes like kind of more of the stereotypical honey that you always I remember getting whenever you would get like a wildflower honey. And then the honeys in Hawaii are they're like vanilla icing, There's a lehua flower, which is a Hawaiian flower, and then there's the kiawe honey, which is from the mesquite tree. And both of those honeys are really, really sweet, and they crystallize really fast, and they're really light, and they don't have much flavor. They're really just like taste more like vanilla icing and kind of spreadable. Um, and then you have like the MacNut honey, which is like really dark and rich and kind of like maple syrup. And then the Christmas berry is the biggest floral source because it just grows wild. It's an invasive plant, really what you'll see on the sides of the highways. And that's really mild as well. It takes a really long time to crystallize. So it's really a, a lot easier to harvest the different single blossom honeys out there. You can go to a lava field and there's pretty much nothing can survive but the ohia tree, which the lehua blossom is on, and you'll get that honey. Because like very few things can survive in a lava field other than the plants that have evolved with uh, on the island. And then you can go where there's just like everything's being taken over by Christmas berry and nothing's being managed, and you can get the Christmas berry honey, or you can go on a MacNut farm and get MacNut honey. um you can't really get coffee honey, even though there's a ton of coffee trees, because those trees have a very short bloom season and they all bloom at the same time. um but here in Pennsylvania, it seems just like all I really predominantly see is like wildflower. So I haven't really dug much deeper into it because my bees did not bring in very much honey at all this year. And really, this winter, I'm going to be on the hunt for an alternative place to put my bees. It would be nice to still have a couple on my property, just for the sake of, my kids being able to see them and shoot quick videos and stuff. But I'd say that for me, that has always been the hardest part of beekeeping, is finding somewhere to put my bees where they are gathering enough food for themselves. Because when you have a good spot for your bees, beekeeping is easy for the most part, and they do well, and you don't have to feed them. And with that, then there's less chances of nosema, and they're a lot healthier. And when they're healthier, they can defend themselves, and they can deal with hive beetles much better. And like it all kind of starts with the bees gathering the food that they're supposed to be eating and being healthy. So it's like the location plays such a big part in that. And it's really hard to tell whether a good spot's going to be a good spot until you just give it a shot and see how it goes.
Yeah.
In Hawaii, I had my bees on this guy's property. It was my husband at the time when we were dating. He was just renting the house there, and they did great. It was an amazing spot for bees. And then this guy came to a bee club meeting and was looking for a beekeeper to put hives on his property. And he lived on the same street, but like exactly 1 mile up the road. I put bees there, and they did horribly. Like not a single hive ever successfully requeened, like ever. They brought in almost no honey to be harvested, like, and it was crazy how it was just 1 mile up the road, and it made such a huge difference for those hives. So you really just never. For me, it might be a matter of just putting my beehives a mile down the road, and it might be a much better season for me.
So there's a comment from Frank, and it kind of reminds me to ask you. So like we're kind of talking about the difference between Hawaii and Pennsylvania with your nectar flows. So um, in Pennsylvania, you have certain times of the year, kind of like everybody here in the United States, that you have times where you don't have nectar flows, and then you do. In Hawaii, were there times where you had dearths in the season, were times where you didn't have any nectar coming in, or any pollen?
Yeah, there were times a year when I would see a pile of dead drones actually outside the hive. But that was more so where we did the tours. It was very low in elevation, close to the beach, and there wasn't as much blooming when the palms weren't blooming, and the coffee and stuff. Um, and I've seen quite a bit of robbing in Hawaii. The farm I worked for moved their hives. They moved them around the island for the different nectar flows, but it wasn't, I'd say, a dearth to the extent that I've seen here in Pennsylvania. Well, it might be, but the thing is, like in Hawaii, there's just this point at which it just like booms, and it's like flowers everywhere. Whereas here, I haven't seen it as much, that big boom. So even when there is a dearth, I think it's just not as the hives recover better in Hawaii. Whereas here, they don't recover as well, and the season is so short. But I've definitely seen. There are just times a year when the bees are doing very little, even though it's warm out. The hive population gets very small. They're down to one brood box, and I'm taking the supers off the hive just to keep small hive beetle populations at bay, because they will start to take over when the population gets so low, and there won't be any drones present.
Mm-hmm. So my next topic is, so you've been keeping bees for a while, and I was wondering, what are some lessons that you have learned along the way?
I'd say probably from my first couple years, I learned to not get so complicated. There's a lot of things you can get so technical and complicated in beekeeping, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And so I started with like a top bar hive, and I was just like, why did I make this so difficult for myself? Like, just get the style hive that is the most common in your area. So if you go to a club meeting or ask a question, there's like people to help you.
Yeah.
And I also learned that the varroa mites are really like the start of a lot for the beehives, and they're collapsing. and to not worry so much about the things that aren't important and to focus on the things that are important. I see a lot of beginner beekeepers. They will worry about everything under the sun before their bees arrive. And, it's like, should I give them 2-to-1 or 1-to-1? When do I put the super on? When do I do this? Like, and they worry about like everything, what kind of hive style. And then when it comes to treating like the late summer when the queen's making winter bees, and it's like crucial that these bees be healthy and not have like a parasite feeding on them, they're just like, I'll see how it goes. And I'm like, no, if you see how it goes, you're going to see a hive die. That's how it's going to go. And then it'll be too late. And so I learned the hard way to not see how it goes and to be a little bit more proactive with important stuff like managing varroa mites and keeping the levels low as opposed to letting them get high and then trying to fix it. And I've definitely learned that if you don't know when to do something, do it earlier than you think, because it's always better to do stuff too early than too late. If it's too late, then it's too late, and then it's too late. There's nothing you can do to fix it, but you can always do it a little too early and fix it then, and then that's okay. Timing is a big part of beekeeping for sure.
Timing is important.
Yeah.
Down here, our timing of doing stuff is really important for us. Like a lot of beekeepers down here can do stuff really early. They can split beehives in February, early March, and that gives a lot of beekeepers a head start. That's just kind of how it is down here. And then, it don't get cold till maybe late November, early December, and we'll have warm days there. But no matter where you're at, being able to time things, when to treat and when to start feeding. I just started to feed here in late September. Just trying to feed the small colonies because most of the big ones are really nice. They have enough nectar. I think they can get through. I'll still feed them some buckets, but I'm just trying to get these smaller ones that don't have as much nectar on them. Kind of spruce them up. I've just been kind of seeing which ones are really, really low, because I do have some ones that are really low and that really need some weight added to them. If they don't have weight added to them, I don't think they're gonna get through winter. But since I already know that, I can get them well spruced on up in time for winter. My main I've already started the treat, so my main focus is feeding and making sure they're healthy. But timing is important. Being proactive, yeah.
That's why. So there's like a bunch of beekeeping apps out there, to help people with their inspections and stuff. But I've been thinking about making one just because I'm trying to just like, I feel like it's the best way to get as much data from people around the world as possible. Because if we could just like have a way to collect from people when they like first split their hive or like when they started feeding, when a different nectar flow started, you could probably put that into different like seasonal beekeeping charts for people so that like when you're starting out you have a better idea of like when the general nectar flow ends and when to expect to treat and when to expect that window of closing the hive up and things like that, because I think that would make beekeeping for beginners a little bit easier, especially now that even though there's a lot of clubs, it sounds like a lot of people don't really go to club meetings so much. They're like, go to these generic Facebook groups and forums and stuff, and you're not really going to get the best information when it comes to timing as you would going to a club meeting in your area. So that's why I'm like trying to figure out ways that we can just like take all this information that people already have around the world and like put this into something that people can access so that they can get a better idea of when to expect to do all of these things for their hives. But I'm not a programmer, so we'll see if there are any AI programs that'll do it for me or not.
So I'm sure everybody here in the chat and every beekeeper out there has different goals and plans that they have. So, what are some plans and goals for you? Do you have any ideas of things that you are wanting to do in the future this year and next year?
Um, I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks to put out this tool I've been working on, and I really just been trying to work on tools like that, like ways that we can help people
Mhm.
understand the process that beekeepers go through to solve problems. And so the one I'm finishing up with now is like a varroa mite tool to help you manage them. You know, like you put in whether you test it or not, and then you put in like if you live in a warm climate or a cold climate, how many mites you got in your sampling. There's brood present. All of those questions that you usually go through if you were to ask a beekeeper what to do, and it will like give you advice on like how to proceed based off of this information, and things like putting together calendars for people so that they understand like when nectar flows are around the country and when people are closing their hive up for winter. Because you know, like you look at a seed packet, the back of the seed packet has a picture of the country, and it has that little like chart of like when you know the frost is and when you can start planting your seeds and when you can't. Like, why can't we have things like that for beekeeping? Like, why can't there be a chart that looks similar to that about like when to harvest your honey? You know, it varies a little bit. Seasons change a little bit, but for the most part, you could really kind of go by some of those guidelines. So I'm really just trying to figure out what tools we can make to make this like first couple years for people easier, and then they can fine tune it and tweak it from there. But you know, like you're just trying to keep them alive those first couple of years, and then you can work on getting better, becoming a better beekeeper after that. And I don't really know what my goal is in terms of how many hives I want. I'd really love to get a bigger property, more acreage at some point, or just buy another property with acreage. But I probably won't ever do in-person classes because the club here has some pretty in-depth in-person classes already. So it doesn't really seem to be something that's needed in this area.
Mhm. That's a good goal to try to achieve. Now, down here, my goals, really is just to expand. Like I mentioned earlier, I have 13 colonies. I've last year had four, tripled. Just kind of goal is just to try to get these bees spruced on up and get them into winter. Come out with 10, maybe triple again. But it just can't always say for sure because things can happen. But that's what I'm hoping to try to achieve. Let's see. I think that's all of my topics. I'm just gonna make sure I'm gonna go through them real quick. Um, I think that's about it. I usually keep all my uh topics and notes just to ask my people who come on the chats and stuff. And my main goal, really, for the rest of the year, um, in terms of channel wise, is just getting folks on and trying to kind of let them kind of share what they are doing and kind of what their goals are, what they're trying to do, kind of what you're trying to do and whatever people are trying to do for newer beekeepers. Because, a lot of new beekeepers struggle and, quit. I mean, at first I thought I was going to quit because of challenging things, I had to face. Because I started 8 years ago. I was really young back then. I was like 8 years old, I think. And, my mom kind of started everything, and I kind of took over. And I think these recent years have been much better than some of the new year the first years, because I really didn't know what I was doing. But then I eventually started to learn a lot more about it, and I guess learned a lot of new things. And I get that's one big thing with, I guess, the longer you keep bees, the more experience you get, which is really a big thing for newer beekeepers.
So what's your goal in the long run? Like, what's your ideal? Because I mean, it takes a lot of time to manage all those hives.
Oh yeah, I
And
can't I can't imagine how some of these beekeepers like Bob Binney and these other big beekeepers who keep about 1,000 colonies. I couldn't do that. That's a insane amount of colonies. I couldn't do that. I'd be happy with. I think the highest I would like to get up to in the long distant featured maybe be 50. And I can handle that. And I think other than that, I think that'd be perfect. Right now I have 13, and next year a reasonable. I mean, I tripled this year, so if I do kind of what I did this year, next year, if I can successfully overwinter my colonies, I can triple again if I do everything like I did this year, as long as I do it correctly. So I think that's kind of my goal. I mean, eventually I do want to kind of get into a sideline type of things. I sell my honey now. I sell it locally, like most beekeepers do. Um, I don't really do like queen rearing or anything. I do plan to do that someday in the future. Do you do any like any? I know. Do you like? I know you probably sell honey locally to folks in your area. That's what I do. Do you? Have you ever did any grafting or anything like that?
yeah, we did grafting at the farm I worked on. They had 4,000 hives to start, and then went down to 2,500 once the rural mite got to Hawaii. I mean, they ran 2,500 hives with 7 employees, because like beekeeping when you have thousands of hives is so different from beekeeping as a hobbyist. They're not like inspecting hives. They just like take off the lid and put a super on,
Yeah.
take the super off. That's like
Yeah.
they're like in a yard of 100 hives for like an hour, and then they get back in the truck and go to another yard. They're they do the same thing to every hive, and some hives make it and some hives don't, and that's just like how it goes. And so yeah, we did queen breeding there, and I did queen breeding at the other farm I worked for too, and it was a lot of fun. I like enjoyed that. It's like you feel like a mad scientist a little bit, but not in the way you do when you're treating for varroa mites, where you just feel like kind of gross because you're using chemicals and acids and stuff. It's like with grafting, it's a little bit more fun. Um, and that one company sent me their grafting kit, which I didn't try this year because um, everything was, I didn't want to mess with the hives since I only had 3 at the time. But I'd like to give it a shot next year. It's like where you just put this box in the hive with a queen, and the queen's like in the box, and then you leave it in there for like 12 hours, and she lays eggs in the box. And then you have these eggs that you know how old they are, and you can then pop the little cells out and put them in queen cups. The grafting, I really hated the grafting tool and having to use that. That part's kind of a pain in the butt, especially if you don't have like a shed or some kind of easy setup to be able to do it. But it's fun when you see all those like queen cells that actually worked from your grafting. That's one of the few things that has gone well where my bees are. They're not bringing in much honey, but every single queen, every single hive that made their own queen, the queen like hatched and is doing really well. So the mating goes well in my area, but as far as them finding food, that hasn't been going as well. But yeah, that's Kona's really great for queen breeding. And whenever you needed a queen, then it was like you just like called one of your friends, and he would meet me in the parking lot of the grocery store and give me however many queens I needed, and they would like be $20 a piece. And that's what everyone wanted to do, because that was the easiest way to make money as a beekeeper. I don't sell my honey anymore. That's what I mostly did for income at first in Hawaii. But it's just too time consuming. I started getting paid by people to keep bees for them, like a hotel paid me to keep bees for them, and I really liked that a lot better because it was just like a monthly income, and it didn't matter how much honey it brought in. They just wanted to be able to tell people that they had bees, and didn't really care Like, as long as the bees were alive and they weren't bothering anybody, and I wasn't, annoying the people that were staying there. They just wanted to be able to have some honey in jars to give out to people. And I kind of like that end of things a little bit better than the honey sales. The honey sales, I just hated the bottling and the labeling and filling the orders and delivering it to all the stores and stuff. It was just like, I just, it was so time consuming for how much money you make. And that's why I like doing stuff like this, like having a YouTube channel and having alternative sources of income that aren't so labor intensive is just like, I think the key to being able to actually stay in business as a beekeeper.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining tonight. We've already gone for an hour. It's already 8 p.m., so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap things up for tonight. Thank you so much for joining the chat tonight. It's been very, very fun. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you again for joining. Thank you all so much in the chat for coming on tonight. If you haven't already, make sure to click that thumbs up button. And if you don't know who Laryssa is, I do have her channel in the description below. A lot of good teaching things on there. For you to check out if you are not already subscribed, and make sure to subscribe to here if you're not subscribed already. Thank you all so much for watching, and hope everybody has a good night.
Bye.